Hi, boys and girls. It's time for us to have another story. Our story today is called The Baseball Mitt. It was spring, and when spring comes, a lot of boys, all they can think about is baseball. Well, Mikie was no exception, and he was good at it. So he had been chosen to be on one of the local teams that summer. But when he went to get out his mitt, his mitt was old, and it had worked up till now. But when he went out to play with the team every day, he kept missing balls. You know, the purpose of a mitt is to catch the ball, and they're shaped kind of so that when the ball comes, it almost grabs it on its own, but your hand's inside of it and you can grab that ball. But they always are shaped kind of like this. But Mikey's mitt was flat. Now, how did it get flat? When a mitt gets really old, what happens is that the stuffing inside, the stuffing protects your hands when those balls come flying into your mitt. But when they get old, that stuffing gets flat. And a flat mitt, balls come, and before the person that's trying to catch it can even grab the ball, that ball falls right off. Poor Mikie. He knew he needed a new mitt. So finally he came home one day and he said, "Mom, I have to have a new mitt for baseball. Mine is old and flat and it's dead. Please, Mom, can I have the money for a new mitt?" Mom said, "You know, Mikie, you have to ask your dad for things like that." Mikie didn't like to ask his dad for money. It was easier to ask Mom. So he just had to have a new mitt. So he went into the office where Dad was working on the papers. Dad was so busy. He was writing and writing, and Mikie kind of like, "I'm here." And Dad, he looked up and he said, "Hi, Mikie, what is it?" Mikie said, "Dad, my baseball mitt, it's all worn out, and I can't catch the balls good. Please, Dad, can I have money for another baseball mitt?" Well, Dad looked at him and he said, "Mikie, I'm sorry, but right now there's just not enough money for a new mitt. You'll have to wait. Maybe for your birthday." But his birthday wasn't when baseball was still being played. He sighed and he left. Well, it was almost time for the baseball game to start, and he ran out to that diamond. And he went out into the field, which was where he played. And he had always been really good at catching those balls. That's how he got chosen to be on the team again this year. But every time one of those balls came flying into the outfield, Mikie ran and he put his hand with his mitt on up in the air. But that flat mitt, the ball just fell off before he could catch it. Finally, that afternoon, the coach came to Mikie and he said, "Mikie, what's wrong? You've always been able to catch balls really well. What's going on this year?" Mikie said, "It's my mitt. It's all worn out." And the coach said, "Well, You're going to have to get a new one then. But Mikie didn't have money for a new one. He really didn't know what to do. Several weeks went by, and almost every game, Mikie was missing balls that came to him. Finally, the coach came to him again. He said, I see you haven't gotten it yet. Borrow one then. So Mikie borrowed from one of the other guys. And yes, he could catch the balls fine, but he couldn't borrow it all the time. Then he didn't have any but his old mitt, and he was missing the balls again. Finally, the coach came back to him and he said, Mikie, if you don't have a new mitt by next week, you're off the team. Mikie was devastated. He loved playing baseball, and he would be off the team if he didn't have a new mitt. Well, his friend Tim, he had come to him a week or so ago, and he said, I've heard the coach talking. If you don't get a new mitt and start catching balls, you're off the team, Mikie. Mikie said, I know. The coach came and talked to me. He gave me to next week. But Dad said there's no money. And I asked him again, and he said there's still not enough money. Tim said, well, it can't hurt to go look. Let's go to McGregor's hardware store. There's a really good mitt in his front window. So they went and they stood outside and they looked at that mitt. And oh, was it a beauty! Now, if you go to the store, if you go to a sports store, mitts can be cheapo ones, under $25. But they can go up to $200 for nice mitts. Mikie, he looked. He said, but I don't have any money. Tim said, why don't you go in and try it on? That can't hurt anything. So Mikie and Tim went in, and he tried on that mitt. It was a perfect fit. But it cost bukus of money. Tim put it back in the window, and they left the hardware store. He didn't know what to do. He didn't have a job. He couldn't earn the money. Who would hire a little kid anyway? He didn't know what to do. Well, sure enough, the next week, the coach kept his promise. No new mitt. Off the team you go. Mikie couldn't believe it. He'd actually been thrown off the team. He didn't know what to do. Oh my, oh my. Well, he didn't want Mom and Dad to know. So he would wander around in the afternoons. He'd go sit in the park. He would do all kinds of things. But nothing was like playing baseball. He knew Dad would be really disappointed if he knew he'd been kicked off the team. He couldn't tell him. Well, several weeks went by. And he and Tim had gone several times and looked at that mitt in Mr. McGregor's window. And Tim said, you could take it. Mikie went, steal it? I've never stole anything in my life. Tim said, well, it's better than being off the team. Well, they went home. A couple days later, Mikie went by himself to Mr. McGregor's store. He looked in the window, and he could see back in the back where Mr. McGregor had his counter, and there was nobody at the counter. He went in the door quietly. He looked this way and he looked that way. Mr. McGregor was nowhere to be seen. He thought he must be in the back room. He stood there right inside of the door, And before he even knew what he was doing, his hand reached out and he picked up that mitt and he opened his coat and he stuffed it inside. And out the door he went. He looked around. There was nobody in the street. He wanted to run. He couldn't believe it. He'd stolen something. But he didn't dare run. If he ran, somebody would know something was wrong. So he carefully walked quietly down the street toward home. When he got home, he thought, where can I hide it? You know, when you steal something, you don't want anybody to know about it. You don't want to be found out. Mikie looked around and he thought, I can't put it in the house. Mom will find it when she cleans. I can't just put it in the garage. The garage. The garage had a huge attic in the top. And you know, for the last who knows how many years, everything that someone didn't know what to do with, they stuffed it in the top of the attic. He thought, the attic, a perfect place. He ran up the stairs inside to the garage. Dad was still at work. And he went up into the attic and he stood there and he looked around and he said, where shall I put it? What shall I put it behind? He looked, and in one corner, he saw a huge stack of newspapers. He went and he looked behind it. And behind that huge stack of newspapers was where the roof came down. And he stuffed that mitt under the edge of the roof. Well, he thought, phew, that's done. Nobody's going to find it here because nobody comes up here unless they just want to stuff something else up here. But you know, he didn't feel good. That mitt didn't belong to him, and he knew it. He knew that one of God's commandments said, thou shalt not steal. And he had stolen. He had thought he could just go get back on the team. But then when he thought more about it, he went. Tim would know I'd stolen it because it's the one that was in the window. And all the other guys would ask where I'd gotten it. I can't just go play. Well, now he had a beautiful mitt that he couldn't use. Weeks went by, and still, of course, he couldn't play. And then one day when he was walking with Tim, Tim said, the guys are saying that Mr. McGregor came to the school and he was asking around if anybody had a new mitt because the one from the window is gone. And Mikie went, it's gone? I wonder who took it. Well, now he really couldn't use it. And it wasn't his birthday, it wasn't Christmas. He couldn't tell anybody he got it for any of those things. It was the wrong time of year. Oh, what was he gonna do? Weeks more went by, and still he couldn't go home in the afternoons because Mom would ask about how baseball was. Dad would know. And then what was he gonna say? So he still messed around in the afternoons. Then Mikie realized that he wasn't sleeping good. And food didn't taste good anymore. He kind of moved it around on his plate. And when nighttime came, when he'd always knelt by his bed to talk to God, his Father, he couldn't even pray anymore because he knew he had broken one of God's commandments. He had stolen something. He was feeling so bad. And that evening at supper, Dad said something that made it even worse. He said, "Mikie, I looked up in that attic and it is such a mess. You and I are going to clean the attic this evening." Oh, if they cleaned the attic, somebody would find the Mitt. Oh, 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 it just got worse and worse and worse. So he sat there at the table and he tried to eat, because if he didn't, his mom would ask. And he thought, I've got to do something and I have to do it now. And he turned to his mother and said, "Excuse me, but I need to go use the restroom." Mom said, "Okay." So he got up and he scooted in the bathroom. He really did need to use the bathroom. But he hurried, and then quietly, so no one would hear, he left the restroom and he scooted down the hall to the back door. And without letting it make any noise at all, he went out and he rushed across to the side door of the garage and he ran up the steps and he picked up that mitt. He thought, somebody'll see me. He wrapped it up in some newspaper and he stuffed it in a grocery bag that he saw laying there. Then what could he do with it? He went outside and then he had what he thought was a good idea. He grabbed one of Dad's shovels and he went behind one of the bushes and he dug a hole and he put that mitt in and he covered it all up. Well, it was kind of under the bush, so nobody could see that the dirt had been disturbed. He put the shovel back. I did it. Nobody's gonna know. He quickly ran back into the house and he scooted back in the bathroom. He shut the bathroom door so they could hear it. And then he went back to the table and Mom said, "You were gone an awful long time. Are you sick, Mike? You don't seem right lately." Mike said, "I'm fine, Mom." But he wasn't fine. And that night when he and Dad went to clean the attic, they cleaned it till it was spotlessly clean, and all those newspapers went in the big garbage can. Phew! At least that mitt wasn't there. Well, a couple more weeks went by, and Mike, he wasn't sleeping good. He was sick to his stomach. He couldn't eat. He couldn't say his prayers. Finally, he sat up in bed and he said, "God, I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry I took the mitt. I knew it was wrong. I'm so sorry." And then he decided that the next day he would go see Mr. McGregor in the hardware store. He would have to tell him what he had done. So the next day he did. In the afternoon, he went to Mr. McGregor's hardware store, and he could see him back at the counter through the window. He went in through the door, and the little bell went ding-a-ling-a-ling. That's how Mr. McGregor knew when somebody came in. Mikie, his stomach was tied in knots, and he thought he was going to throw up. And then he thought he was going to cry. But he knew that God would help him to do the right thing. So he went back to where Mr. McGregor was standing behind the counter, and he said, "Mr. McGregor." Mr. McGregor said, "Well, Mikie, how are you? I haven't seen you for a long time." Mikie said, He wanted to say he was okay, but that would be a lie. He looked at Mr. McGregor and then he put his head down, he shut his eyes, and he said, "Mr. McGregor, I'm the one that took your baseball mitt out of the window. I stole it. I'm so sorry." Oh, I'm so sorry. I knew it was wrong. I knew one God of God's commandments said you're not supposed to steal, but I did it. Oh, Mr. McGregor, I hid it because I couldn't use it. Everybody would know. So I stole it for no reason. And then Mr. McGregor, Dad was going to have me help clean the attic. And that's where I'd hidden it. I took it outside and I buried it. And before I came here, I thought I would go get it to bring it back to you. But Mr. McGregor, and he held up a sack. He said, it's all moldy from all the summer rains. And I had dug a hole and put it in. And I thought I'd be okay in this bag. But that just gathered the moisture. And now it's all moldy. And some kind of creature ate a big hole in it. I'll pay you for it if I can only find a job. I'm so sorry. I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to ever steal anything again. Well, Mr. McGregor, he stood there, and he looked ever so kindly at Mikie, and he said, Mikie, I am so proud of you for coming to tell me. You're right. It's wrong to steal. Anything that doesn't belong to you and you take it, it's stealing. Mikie, if I were to give you a job, would you like to work off the price of that mitt for me? Mikie went, you trust me to work for you after I stole from you? Mr. McGregor said, I think you're sorry, and I don't think you'd ever do it again. Let's see. I think if you worked from now till school starts, that would be enough. You can come every afternoon and work here in the store during the time that you would play baseball. Mikie said, yeah, I can't play baseball anymore because my mitt was so bad. I just kept missing the balls and the coach threw me off the team. Mr. McGregor, he looked at him and he said, well, it's settled then. You can come work for me. And Mikie did. He didn't tell anybody what he was doing. And weeks went by. Well, one of the ladies told Mikie's mother. She said, why isn't Mikie on the team? He was a good player, but he's not on the team anymore. And Mother said, he's not playing baseball every afternoon? The lady said, no, he's not. Mother said, that's odd. So when she went home, Dad was home, and she went in to talk to Dad. She said, did you know that Mikie's not playing baseball anymore? He said, I didn't. That's odd. Don't say anything to him. Let me figure out. He's gone every afternoon. I thought he was playing ball. Well, neither Mom or Dad had gone to any of the games, so they didn't know. That afternoon, Dad went out, and he followed Mikie at a distance. And he saw Mikie go to Mr. McGregor's hardware store. And when he peeked in the window, he saw him sweeping the floor and putting things up on the shelves. He thought, he's working for Mr. McGregor. Well, after he knew that Mikie had gone home, he went back to the hardware store and he went inside and he said, is my son working for you? Mr. McGregor said, yes, he is. He has for numerous weeks now. And Dad said, did he tell you why he's working for you? Why he wanted a job? And Mr. McGregor said, I will tell you the whole story. And he told him about the stolen mitt and how weeks and weeks and weeks after it had been stolen, Mikie had come to him, and how brave he had been to tell him that he had stolen it, and he'd asked forgiveness. He said if he had a job, he would be glad to pay for it. And I believe that Mikie will never steal again. And I agreed to give him a job. He agreed to work for me till the end of the summer, till right before school starts, and that we would be even. And then Mr. McGregor looked at Mikie's dad and he said, I've decided Mikie works so hard, he will have more than paid for that mitt, that I'm ordering another one. I'm going to give it to him at the last baseball game of the year. And Dad said, well, how are you going to get him there? He's not on the team anymore, I'm told. Mr. McGregor said, I've talked to the coach. I'll take care of it. I'll get him there. He said it would be nice if you could be at the game, because I'm going to ask the coach if Mikie can play that last game. And Dad said, would you let me buy the mitt for Mikie? I'd really like to. And Mr. McGregor said, that's fine. When the end of the season came, and it was time for the last game, and all the boys in the neighborhood were so excited for the last baseball game of the season, Mr. McGregor went to Mikie and he said, Mikie, I'd like you to do something for me. I would like you to go with me to the final game of the season. And Mikie's face kind of fell. He said, I'm not on the team anymore. He said, I know that. But I'd like you to go watch with me. It would be fun for me, please. So Mikie agreed. He and Mr. McGregor went. Dad was there, and Dad gave him a box. Mikie said, what is it? Dad said, open it. He opened it, and there was a beautiful brand new mitt. Mikie couldn't believe it. And then the coach came over and he said, Mikie, get out there in the field. You're going to play with us today. Mikie couldn't believe it. And you know, with that brand new mitt, every ball that came his way went smashing into that mitt. And they didn't fall out anymore. Oh, was Mike ever happy? When the game was over, Mr. McGregor said, you have paid back your debt. The coach has said you can be on the team again next year. And I think you've learned a huge lesson. Mikie said, I feel so much better. I will never, ever do anything like that again. And you know, with God's help, Mikie has never, ever done anything like that again. Boys and girls, God's 10 good rules were given to us for a reason. Mikie was miserable after he broke one of them. You don't want to make yourself miserable. Follow what God says, and you will be happy. Thank you, boys and girls. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.